Family should be your sanctuary, the people who stand by you through thick and thin. That's what I always believed, what I taught my daughter Claire from the moment she was born. For 63 years, I lived by that principle, putting my family above everything else. But sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones who take advantage of your kindness the most. I never thought my own daughter would be the one to slam the door in my face, especially during Christmas, our most cherished family tradition. I never imagined she would choose her manipulative husband over her own mother. The same daughter who drives around in that gleaming black Range Rover she's so proud of, showing it off to her friends like it's some badge of honor. The Range Rover that sits in her driveway with my name on the title. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember Claire as a little girl, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding my hand as we walked through the park. She was always spirited, determined, the kind of child who knew exactly what she wanted. When she was 7, she decided she wanted to learn piano. Not just any lessons, she wanted to be the best. Richard and I scraped together every penny we could to buy her a secondhand upright. We couldn't afford much else that Christmas, but watching her face light up when she saw that piano made every sacrifice worthwhile. As the years passed, Claire excelled at everything she touched: honor roll, debate team captain, scholarship to Northwestern. Richard and I may not have been wealthy, but we gave her everything we could. We remortgaged our home to help with her college expenses, worked overtime to ensure she never felt the financial strain. Even when Richard's health began to decline, we kept our struggles hidden from her. She needed to focus on her future, we told ourselves. We didn't want to burden her. Claire met Elliot during her final year of college. He was charming, handsome, from what she called old money. The kind of family with summer homes and trust funds. I still remember her calling me, voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, he drives a Mercedes. Can you believe it?" And his parents have a lake house in Michigan. I was happy for her, truly. But something about the way she described him, always leading with his possessions, his family's wealth, left an uneasy feeling in my stomach. The first time I met Elliot was at Claire's graduation dinner. He ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without even glancing at the price, then spent the evening regaling us with stories about his family's European vacations and his plans to join his father's investment firm. Not once did he ask about Richard's health, though my husband was clearly struggling that night, his hands trembling as he cut his steak. "He's just nervous," Claire whispered to me in the bathroom later. "He really wants to impress you." I smiled and nodded, not wanting to dampen her happiness. But I couldn't help noticing how her eyes lingered on his watch, his designer suit, the way she seemed more enamored with the lifestyle he represented than the man himself. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I wasn't surprised. Claire had always been ambitious, drawn to the finer things in life. But I was surprised by how quickly she changed. My down-to-earth daughter suddenly became obsessed with appearances. Our weekly phone calls dwindled as she became immersed in Elliot's world. Country club memberships, charity galas, weekend trips to Manhattan. The wedding was a lavish affair at Elliot's parents' estate. 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. I felt out of place in my carefully chosen dress from Nordstrom, surrounded by women dripping in designer labels. Richard, by then, using a wheelchair, was seated at a table far from the main party. For accessibility, they claimed, though it felt more like we were being tucked away, out of sight. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I told Claire as I helped adjust her veil. The wedding dress had cost more than our mortgage payment. She'd insisted on paying for it herself, though I suspected Elliot's family had stepped in. She barely acknowledged me, too busy texting her bridesmaids, ensuring everything was perfect. After the wedding, Claire and Elliot moved into a sleek, downtown condo, a gift from his parents. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then quarterly. When Richard's condition worsened, Claire visited less and less. "We're just so busy, Mom," she'd say. "Elliot's working on a huge deal." Or, "We have the Hendersons' charity gala this weekend." Always excuses, always prioritizing their social calendar over family. When Richard passed away 3 years ago, Claire flew in for the funeral but left immediately after. "Elliot has an important client meeting," she explained, hugging me briefly before slipping into her waiting Uber. I stood alone in our family home that night, surrounded by sympathy casseroles from neighbors who'd shown more kindness than my own daughter. The inheritance wasn't much: our modest home, Richard's life insurance policy, and the small nest egg we'd managed to save. Nothing compared to the wealth Claire had married into, but it was everything we had. I sold our home, unable to bear the emptiness without Richard, and moved into a small apartment closer to my sister Martha. That's when Claire suddenly became attentive again. She called regularly, invited me to lunch, seemed genuinely interested in my well-being. I was touched, thinking perhaps grief had reminded her of family's importance. How naive I was. "Mom," she said over brunch one Sunday, twirling her mimosa glass between manicured fingers, "Elliot and I have been thinking about upgrading our car collection." She emphasized the word collection as if to remind me of their wealth. "We found this gorgeous Range Rover, but with the house renovation and our trip to Bali next month, we're a bit stretched." I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the calculated kindness for what it was. But I was lonely, desperate to maintain my connection with my only child. "How much do you need, sweetheart?" I asked. The Range Rover cost nearly $110,000, almost a third of my entire inheritance from Richard. Claire assured me it was just a loan, that they'd pay me back once Elliot's year-end bonus came through. I knew deep down that money would never find its way back to me, but I agreed anyway. The dealership required the title be in the name of the person providing the funds, so the vehicle was registered in my name with Claire as a co-signer. "Just a formality," she said dismissively. For a while, things seemed better between us. Claire invited me to their renovated home for dinner occasionally, though these invitations always came with conditions. "Don't mention politics to Elliot's father," or "Please don't wear that blue sweater. It's a bit dated." Each request chipped away at my self-worth, but I complied, grateful for any time with my daughter. Then came the grandchildren, twins, a boy and girl named Maxwell and Madison, beautiful babies who rekindled my purpose. I offered to help with childcare, eager to be an involved grandmother. Claire accepted, though it quickly became clear I was viewed more as free labor than family. I was expected to follow their rigid parenting rules, feed the children their organic, locally sourced meals, and disappear when Claire and Elliot returned home. "The nanny usually leaves through the back door," Claire informed me on my first day. "It's less disruptive for the children." I was no longer mom, I was the help. Despite the hurt, I treasured those moments with my grandchildren. Maxwell had Richard's kind eyes, and Madison his stubborn chin. I would whisper stories about their grandfather as they drifted to sleep, determined they would know the man who would have adored them. Last Thanksgiving marked the beginning of the end. Claire and Elliot hosted at their home, a showcase of wealth rather than a family gathering. Elliot's parents, his sister Vivian and her husband, and a few of their closest friends, people I'd never met who worked at Elliot's firm. I brought my famous sweet potato casserole, a family recipe passed down from my grandmother. "Oh, Mom, you didn't need to bring anything," Claire said when I arrived, taking the dish with a tight smile. "We have the caterers handling everything." My casserole never made it to the table. Throughout dinner, I sat quietly as Elliot regaled the table with stories of their recent trip to the Maldives, the twins' acceptance into the city's most prestigious preschool, and his latest bonus. No one asked about my life, my adjustment to widowhood, my new apartment. I was invisible. When I mentioned that Martha and I had volunteered at a homeless shelter the previous weekend. Vivian's eyebrows shot up. How? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Charitable, she murmured, exchanging glances with Claire. Later, I overheard them in the kitchen, voices low but clear enough. Your mother is so quaint, Vivian said with a laugh. The homeless shelter story? Really? I know, Claire replied, sighing. It's exhausting sometimes. She doesn't understand our world. Their world. As if I belonged to some different species, not the woman who had sacrificed everything for her daughter. The final straw came 3 weeks before Christmas. Claire called, her voice unusually hesitant. Mom, about the holidays. Elliot and I have decided to do something different this year. We're hosting a Christmas Eve dinner, but it's going to be adults only. Very formal. That sounds lovely, I said, waiting for the invitation. A pause. The thing is, Mom, it's really for Elliot's business associates. His father thinks it's important to establish these connections. I understand. I'll wear my black dress, the one from Aunt Martha's 70th birthday. Another pause, longer this time. Actually, we were thinking it would be best if you spent Christmas with Aunt Martha this year. These are very important people, and Elliot needs to make the right impression. The words hit like a physical blow. You're uninviting me from Christmas? From seeing my grandchildren open their presents? Don't be dramatic, Mom. You can see the kids on the 26th. It's just one holiday. But it wasn't just one holiday. It was the final confirmation that I no longer fit into Claire's carefully curated life. That the daughter I raised valued appearances over family. That the woman who drove a Range Rover I had paid for couldn't find room for her mother at her Christmas table. I hung up without responding, my hand shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. For hours, I sat in my apartment, staring at Richard's photograph on the mantel. What would you do? I whispered to his smiling face. And somehow, I knew. Richard had always valued honesty above all else. No relationship built on lies can stand, he used to say. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls, the first to my attorney, the second to the DMV. Then I drove to Claire and Elliot's house, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. The housekeeper answered, surprised to see me without an appointment. Mrs. Harrington is at her Pilates class, she informed me. She won't be home until noon. That's fine, I replied. I'm not here to see Claire. I'm here for the Range Rover. Her confusion was evident, but she stepped aside as I walked through the house to the 3-car garage. There it sat, gleaming. Black and imposing, the vehicle that had become a symbol of everything wrong between my daughter and me. I used my spare key, the one Claire didn't know I had, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, as smooth and powerful as the day it was purchased. With the garage door open, I carefully backed out, then drove calmly down the manicured driveway. My phone rang before I'd even reached the end of their street. Claire's name flashed on the screen. I answered on speaker. Mom? Elsa says you just took my car? What the hell are you doing? Correction, Claire. I took my car. The one with my name on the title. The one I paid $110,000 for. That's not fair. You know that was a gift. You can't just take it back because you're mad about Christmas. I pulled to a stop. At a red light, watching a young mother cross the street with her child. They were holding hands, the little one skipping alongside her. My heart ached. This isn't about Christmas, Claire. This is about respect, about family, about the values I thought I raised you with. So you're punishing me? Real mature, Mom. I'm not punishing you. I'm simply reclaiming what's legally mine. You made it very clear that I don't fit into your life anymore. Why should my assets continue to fund it? I could hear her spluttering, the familiar tantrum brewing. Claire had always been skilled at turning situations around, making herself the victim. What am I supposed to drive now? How will I take the kids to school? I believe Elliot has a perfectly good Mercedes. And if that's insufficient, perhaps his year-end bonus can cover a new vehicle, one that actually belongs to you. The silence on the other end was telling. I could almost see her mental calculations, weighing the cost of a new car against the humiliation of backing down. "Mom," she finally said, her voice dropping into the wheedling tone I recognized from her childhood. "I'm sorry if you felt excluded. That wasn't my intention. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? We can talk about this like adults." "I'm not available tonight," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I'm volunteering at the homeless shelter. Remember? Those quaint people I prefer to spend time with." Another silence. You heard that?" "I hear everything, Claire. I always have. I heard how you speak about me to your in-laws. I heard how you instructed the nanny to treat me when I watched the twins. I heard you lie to Elliot about where the money for this car came from, telling him it was from your personal savings. Mom, please, I can explain." "No need. Actions speak louder than words, and yours have been shouting for years. I'm simply, finally listening." I ended the call as I pulled into my attorney's office. Barbara was waiting for me, documents in hand. Not just the vehicle title, but a revised will, one that established a trust for Maxwell and Madison's education. A trust that could only be accessed when they turned 18, with no possibility of Claire or Elliot dipping into it beforehand. "Are you sure about this, Evelyn?" Barbara asked, watching me sign the papers. "It's a significant change. Thought about Claire, about the little girl who once sat on Richard's shoulders at the county fair, about the teenager who brought home stray cats and begged to keep them, about the young woman who cried at Richard's bedside when he first fell ill. Somewhere inside the status-obsessed woman she'd become, that daughter still existed. But I couldn't reach her anymore." "I'm sure," I replied. "My grandchildren deserve to know that true wealth isn't measured by the car you drive or the address on your mailbox. It's measured by how you treat people, especially the ones who would give everything for you." The Range Rover sold quickly, fetching just over $90,000. I donated half to the homeless shelter where Martha and I volunteered, establishing a program for single mothers struggling to make ends meet. The other half funded a trip, not to the Maldives or Bali, but to all the places Richard and I had dreamed of visiting but never could. The Grand Canyon at sunrise, the redwood forests of California, the quiet beaches of the Oregon coast. Christmas Day found me in a small coastal town, watching waves crash against rocks as families gathered in nearby homes. Martha had decided to join me for part of the journey, and we shared a simple meal in our rented cottage, raising glasses to Richard's memory. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts, no desperate attempts from Claire to re-establish contact. It wasn't until New Year's Eve that her name appeared on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but something, perhaps Richard's voice in my head urging compassion, made me accept the call. "Happy New Year, Claire," I said, bracing myself for accusations or demands. Instead, her voice was small, subdued. "Mom, I need to apologize." I sat down on the edge of my hotel bed, looking out at the sunset over the Pacific. "I'm listening." "After you took the car, Elliot was furious. He couldn't understand why it was in your name. I had to tell him the truth. That we didn't have the money for it, that you had paid for it. He didn't take it well. I imagine not. He accused me of lying, of hiding things from him. And he was right. I have been. Not just about the car, but about everything. About who I am, where I came from. I've been so desperate to fit into his world that I've been pretending to be someone I'm not." The admission hung between us, more honest than anything she'd said to me in years. His parents were even worse, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. They suggested we shouldn't be trusted with their family assets if we couldn't manage our own finances. They canceled the Christmas Eve dinner. Elliot blamed me for embarrassing him. I closed my eyes, torn between maternal instinct to comfort her and the hard-earned wisdom that sometimes people need to face consequences. I'm sorry it came to this, Claire. Truly. No, don't apologize. You were right. About everything. I've become horrible. Shallow. The kind of person Dad would have been ashamed of. The mention of Richard broke something open inside me. Your father could never be ashamed of you, Claire. Disappointed, perhaps? But never ashamed. He always believed in your capacity to grow, to learn, to become better. A muffled sob came through the phone. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. Elliot and I are barely speaking. His parents have made it clear I'm not the wife they wanted for their son. And I don't even recognize myself anymore. Start by recognizing the problem, I said gently. You've already done that. But what about us? Can you ever forgive me for how I've treated you? For banning you from Christmas? For everything? I watched as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, taking 2024 with it. A new year, a new beginning. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, Claire. It's something I choose to give. And I do forgive you. But rebuilding trust, that will take time. And effort. On both our parts. I want to try, she whispered. I really do. Then that's where we start. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with honesty. With remembering what matters. We talked for over an hour, more openly than we had in years. About Richard, about the twins, about the values we wanted them to grow up with. About Claire's marriage, and what, if anything, could be salvaged from it. About my journey along the coast and the perspective it had given me. 2 weeks later, I returned to find Claire waiting at the airport, alone. No Range Rover, no designer outfit, just my daughter in jeans and a sweater I'd given her years ago. She looked younger somehow, unburdened. The twins miss you, she said, as we hugged. They keep asking when Grandma is coming back. And Elliot? I asked carefully as we walked to the parking lot. She sighed, leading me to a modest Honda sedan I didn't recognize. We're trying, counseling twice a week. It's difficult. He's realizing his parents' approval isn't everything. I'm realizing appearances aren't either. I nodded, noting how she opened the car door for me, something the old Claire would have considered beneath her. I made a sweet potato casserole, she added as she started the engine. The one from great-grandma's recipe. It's not Thanksgiving, but I thought maybe we could start some new traditions. As we drove through familiar streets toward my apartment, I looked at my daughter's profile, seeing echoes of the child she had been, glimpses of the woman she might become. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, mends slowly. But we were moving in the right direction. Sometimes revealing the truth about who owns what, whether it's a luxury SUV or the narrative of your own life, is the first step toward reclaiming what really matters. The most valuable assets aren't the ones that sit in your driveway or hang in your closet. They're the connections that sustain you, the love that forgives you, and the courage to begin again when you've lost your way. Richard would have been proud of us both. The first few months after Richard's funeral were the hardest. Our modest 2-bedroom house, once filled with laughter and life, suddenly felt cavernous and cold. I would wake up reaching for him, my hand finding only empty sheets. His reading glasses still sat on the nightstand, a half-finished mystery novel marking the page where his life had paused. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Some mornings, I'd make 2 cups of coffee out of habit, the second one growing cold. as I stared out the kitchen window at the garden he'd tended so lovingly. The roses were beginning to wilt without his care. Richard had always been the one with the green thumb, not me. I tried calling Claire daily in those early weeks. Most calls went to voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Mom. Just checking in. Love you." Simple messages that masked the growing hole in my chest. When she did answer, our conversations were rushed, peppered with the background noise of her glamorous life, the clinking of glasses at business lunches, the muffled voices of housekeepers and nannies, Elliot calling for her attention. "I really can't talk now, Mom. We have the Hendersons coming over. I'll call you tomorrow, promise." Tomorrow rarely came. Martha suggested grief counseling. At first, I resisted. "I'm fine," I insisted, though we both knew that was a lie. The woman who stared back at me from the bathroom mirror, hollow-eyed, hair unwashed, still wearing Richard's old cardigan despite the summer heat, was far from fine. Eventually, I relented, joining a support group at the community center 2 blocks from our house. 6 strangers united by loss. A young man whose wife died in childbirth. An elderly gentleman who'd lost his partner of 40 years. A teenage girl, silent and stone-faced, there only because her father made her come. We sat in a circle of metal folding chairs, clutching styrofoam cups of terrible coffee, sharing pieces of our broken hearts. "The hardest part," said Delia, a woman in her 70s who'd lost her husband to the same heart condition that took Richard, "is that the world expects you to move on after a few months. They stop bringing casseroles. They stop checking in. They get uncomfortable when you mention his name. Like grief has an expiration date." I nodded, thinking of Claire's discomfort whenever I mentioned her father. "My daughter acts like it's contagious," I admitted. "Like if she spends too much time with me, death might rub off on her." "My kids are the same," Delia replied, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "They think if they ignore it, pretend everything's normal, then it will be. They don't understand that normal doesn't exist anymore." That support group became my lifeline. Every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 hours of raw, honest conversation. No platitudes, no "he's in a better place now," or "at least he didn't suffer." Just truth. Pure, unvarnished acknowledgement of the gaping wound that loss leaves behind. Slowly, I began to heal. Not recover, not get over it, as Claire once tactlessly suggested, but learn to carry the grief rather than be crushed by it. 3 months after the funeral, I finally gathered the courage to tackle Richard's closet. Martha came over to help, bringing a bottle of his favorite whiskey. "For strength," she said, pouring 2 generous glasses. We worked in companionable silence, sorting his clothes into piles. Donate, keep, discard. His favorite flannel shirt still smelled faintly of him, a mixture of aftershave and that indefinable scent that was uniquely Richard. I buried my face in it, inhaling deeply, trying to commit the fragrance to memory before it faded forever. Martha pretended not to notice the tears staining the fabric. In the pocket of his Sunday jacket, I found a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny piano. The gift tag read, "For Claire, love, Dad." He must have bought it before he got sick, saving it for her birthday or Christmas. I ran my finger over the charm, remembering the little girl who once played heart and soul over and over until she perfected it. Richard patiently listening from his armchair, applauding even the 100th rendition. When had that determined child transformed into the status-obsessed woman who couldn't spare time for her dying father? I called Claire that evening, hopeful. "I found something of Dad's I think you'd want," I said when she finally answered, the sounds of a dinner party echoing in the background. "Can it wait, Mom? We have guests. It's a bracelet he bought for you, a piano charm. I think he was saving it for your birthday." A pause. That's nice. Maybe mail it to me? Or I can pick it up next time I'm in town." Next time. Always next time. I clutched the phone tighter. When might that be? It's been 3 months since you visited. Mom, please, don't start. You know how busy we are. The twins are teething, Elliot's up for partner, and we're renovating the guest house. The guest house. For visitors they deemed worthy of their time. Not me. Of course, I said, the words tasting like ash. I understand. But I didn't. I couldn't fathom how the daughter we raised, the one who once cried over injured butterflies, could be so callously dismissive of her father's memory, her mother's loneliness. That night, I placed the bracelet in my jewelry box. Someday, perhaps Claire would want it. Someday, she might remember the father who'd treasured her, who'd worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her piano lessons, who'd built her a dollhouse by hand because we couldn't afford the one she'd seen in the fancy toy store downtown. As autumn crept in, painting the maple tree in our front yard brilliant shades of orange and gold, I faced another hurdle, selling the house. It was becoming increasingly clear that I couldn't manage it alone. The property taxes were steep, the maintenance overwhelming without Richard's handyman skills. More practically, every corner held memories that cut like glass. The hallway where he'd taught Claire to dance for her first formal. The back porch where he'd sit with his coffee every morning, watching birds at the feeder he'd built. The bedroom, where he'd taken his last breath, surrounded by medical equipment, but still finding the strength to smile, to squeeze my hand one final time. The realtor suggested staging the house, removing personal touches to make it more appealing to buyers. People want to envision their own lives here, not yours, she explained, gently but firmly directing me to take down family photos, to pack away Richard's collection of vintage cameras, to paint over the height markers charting Claire's growth on the kitchen doorframe. Each task felt like another small death, another piece of our history erased. When the house sold, quickly for slightly above asking price, I called Claire immediately. I've accepted an offer, I told her, expecting, perhaps congratulations or at least acknowledgement of the emotional milestone. That's great, she replied, distracted. Did you get a good price? Not, are you okay? Not, do you need help packing? Just the bottom line, the dollar amount, as if 40 years of memories could be quantified so neatly. I did, I answered, swallowing disappointment. The closing is in 6 weeks. I've found a condo near Aunt Martha. A condo? Mom, are you sure? Those places are so small. It's just me now, I reminded her, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I don't need much space. Well, if you're happy, she said dismissively. Oh, before I forget, Elliot and I are hosting a dinner party next Friday. Some really important clients from Japan. Very exclusive. You should come. The invitation caught me off guard. After months of declined calls and rushed conversations, this sudden inclusion seemed suspicious. Still, hope flickered. Perhaps Claire was finally emerging from her self-absorbed bubble, remembering she had a mother who loved her. I'd love to, I said, trying to temper my enthusiasm. What time should I arrive? 7 sharp. And Mom, wear something. Current. These people are very traditional, very image-conscious. Maybe that black dress you wore to Cousin Jenny's wedding? That was nice. The black dress was 8 years old, purchased for a family wedding Claire had barely deigned to attend, claiming she and Elliot had a conflict with a charity gala. But it was my nicest outfit, classic and well-made. Of course, sweetheart. I'll see you Friday. I spent the week packing, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to offer Claire. I set aside Richard's watch for Maxwell, his first edition Hemingway collection for when the twins were older. Family heirlooms not valuable in dollars, but rich in history. The china teacups my grandmother had brought from England. The hand-carved chess set Richard's father had made during the Depression. I called Claire twice to ask if she wanted to look through things before the estate sale, but she was swamped with preparations for the dinner party. I tried not to take it personally. Friday evening, I dressed carefully. The black dress still fit, though a bit more snugly than before. Grief had a way of settling around my middle, comfort food becoming exactly that, a temporary solace, in a world gone sideways. I added Richard's mother's pearl necklace, a spritz of the perfume he'd given me for our last anniversary, a quick application of lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked tired but presentable. Not glamorous, not fashionable by Claire and Elliot's standards, but dignified. Real. Claire and Elliot's home was in Lakeview Heights, an exclusive gated community where houses weren't called houses but estates, or manors. Their particular showpiece was a modernist structure of glass and steel, perched on a hill overlooking the lake. Architecturally impressive but cold, lacking the lived-in warmth of a true home. A uniformed valet took my car, my sensible, well-maintained Honda Civic that Richard and I had purchased 6 years earlier. I felt a flash of self-consciousness as it was parked between a Jaguar and something sleek and European I couldn't even identify. The housekeeper answered the door, a young woman with kind eyes who'd been with them since the twins were born. "Mrs. Harrington," she greeted me warmly. "So nice to see you again. The guests are gathering in the main lounge." I followed her, through the marble-floored entrance hall, past the formal dining room where an elaborate table was set for at least 20, into what Claire called the lounge, a vast open space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. A dozen or so people stood in small clusters, champagne flutes in hand, engaged in the kind of polite, surface-level conversation that passes for socializing in these circles. I spotted Claire immediately, radiant in a red designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She was speaking animatedly to an older Japanese gentleman, her hand resting casually on Elliot's arm. Her husband looked every inch the successful young executive in his tailored suit, his carefully cultivated expression of interested engagement. They were a striking couple, I had to admit. Polished, attractive, the very picture of affluence and success. Claire saw me hovering uncertainly at the edge of the room and excused herself, gliding over with a practiced smile. "Mom, you made it," she said, air-kissing my cheek. Her perfume was expensive, her makeup flawless. "Come meet Mr. Tanaka. He's considering a major investment with Elliot's firm." Now the invitation made sense. I was window dressing, part of the carefully constructed image they wanted to project. Family values, 3 generations, tradition. I allowed myself to be led toward the Japanese businessman, forcing a smile even as disappointment settled in my stomach. "Mr. Tanaka, this is my mother, Evelyn Harper." Claire introduced me with a subtle emphasis on mother, as if reassuring him I wasn't some random older woman who'd wandered in off the street. The gentleman bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Mrs. Harper. Your daughter tells me you have recently sold your home?" "Yes," I confirmed, somewhat surprised Claire had mentioned it. "After my husband passed, it seemed the right time for a change." Mr. Tanaka nodded solemnly. "In Japan, we believe the older generation should always be honored, cared for. Your daughter speaks very highly of you." "Does she?" I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I nodded politely. "Family is everything." "Indeed," he agreed. "I was just telling your daughter and son-in-law how impressed I am with their dedication to family values, the way they balance work and home life, their commitment to providing the best for their children while still honoring traditions." He smiled at Claire. "Mrs. Elliot mentioned that you will be moving in with them soon to help raise the grandchildren in the traditional way. Very admirable." I nearly choked on my champagne. Moving. In with them. What on earth was Claire talking about? I'd never even been invited to stay overnight, let alone relocate permanently. Claire laughed nervously, her fingers tightening around her glass. "Mr. Tanaka is very interested in multi-generational living arrangements," she said quickly. "I was just explaining how common they are in American families." How fortunate, Mr. Tanaka continued, oblivious to the tension, that your family follows these values. In my experience, many young Americans abandon their parents to retirement communities, forgetting the wisdom and support the elder generation provides. He turned to me. Your daughter tells me you will have your own suite in their new lake house? Very generous. The lake house. The property Elliot had been eyeing for months. The one he needed investors like Mr. Tanaka to help finance. The one that existed only in architectural drawings and Claire's ambitious imagination. We haven't finalized those plans yet, I said carefully, not wanting to embarrass Claire, but unwilling to participate in her charade. I'm quite looking forward to my new condo. Independence suits me. A flicker of confusion crossed Mr. Tanaka's face. Claire's smile became brittle. Mom's always been very modest, she said quickly. She doesn't like to impose, even though we've insisted she should live with us. Right, Mom? The look in her eyes was pleading, desperate. Play along. Don't ruin this for us. I remembered similar looks from her childhood, when she'd broken a vase and begged me not to tell her father, when she'd stayed out past curfew and sworn she'd lost track of time. I'd covered for her then, making excuses, smoothing things. Over. The dutiful mother protecting her child. But she wasn't a child anymore, and I was tired of pretending. Actually, I said, meeting Mr. Tanaka's curious gaze, my daughter and I have very different ideas about family arrangements. I prefer my independence, and Claire and Elliot are quite busy with their careers. I smiled, keeping my tone light. American families come in all varieties, Mr. Tanaka. Some traditional, some less so. Claire's face drained of color. Mr. Tanaka looked between us, clearly sensing the undercurrent. I see, he said diplomatically. Every family finds its own. Hers were exactly, I agreed. If you'll excuse me, I should say hello to the other guests. I moved away before Claire could respond, making my way toward the bar where I ordered a sparkling water. Within minutes, Claire appeared at my elbow, her smile gone, replaced by barely contained fury. What are you doing? She hissed, keeping her voice low. Do you have any idea how important this dinner is for Elliot? For us? I'm not lying to impress your husband's business associates, I replied evenly. You never once suggested I move in with you. In fact, you've made it quite clear that I'm welcome only at carefully scheduled intervals. It's called social courtesy, Mom. Mr. Tanaka values family connections. It's what his culture expects. Then perhaps you should actually value family, not just pretend to when it's convenient. Her eyes narrowed. That's not fair. We're busy. Building something here. Careers, connections, a future for the twins. Just because I don't call every day doesn't mean I don't care. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? I challenged. Really asked, not just as a formality before changing the subject. When was the last time you invited me over because you wanted my company, not because you needed something or wanted to impress someone? Claire glanced around nervously, checking if anyone was watching our tense exchange. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. It never is it? I sighed, suddenly weary. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you further. But Claire, you need to understand something. I won't be used as a prop in your perfect family narrative. Not tonight, not ever. She stared at me, a mixture of anger and something else. Hurt, perhaps. Or the dawning realization that our relationship had deteriorated beyond simple misunderstandings. Before she could respond, Elliot appeared, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. Everything okay here? He asked, his tone pleasant but his eyes sharp, assessing. Dinner's about to be served. Everything's fine, Claire assured him, composing herself. Mom and I were just catching up. Elliot turned to me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Evelyn, I've seated you next to Mrs. Tanaka. She's very interested in American crafts. I mentioned you used to do quilting? Another fabrication. I'd never quilted in my life. Richard had been the one with artistic talents, woodworking, amateur photography. Crafts Claire had apparently forgotten or deliberately misattributed to create a more traditionally feminine narrative for her mother. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," I said, matching his artificial smile. "Richard was the artist in our family. I can barely sew a button." A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "Well, I'm sure you'll find something to discuss with her. Arts, gardening, grandchildren, the usual topics." The usual topics. As if I were a stock character in their production. The harmless grandmother? Limited to safe, unthreatening subjects appropriate for a woman of my age and status. Not politics, not business, not anything that might suggest I had thoughts or opinions worth considering. "I'm sure we'll manage," I replied, resisting the urge to inform him that before retirement, I'd managed the accounting department for a medium-sized manufacturing company, negotiating contracts and overseeing a staff of 15. That, I read. 3 newspapers daily, followed world events closely, and had opinions on everything from market fluctuations to Middle Eastern politics. That I was, in short, a fully realized human being, with interests far beyond the reductive categories he'd assigned me. Dinner was an elaborate affair, 7 courses, each paired with a specific wine, served by staff who appeared and disappeared with choreographed precision. I was seated between Mrs. Tanaka, who spoke limited English, and one of Elliot's colleagues, a balding man who spent the entire meal talking over me to the investment banker across the table. I picked at my food, smiled politely when appropriate, and observed. I watched as Claire charmed the table, her laugh tinkling at all the right moments, her questions perfectly calculated to make each guest feel important, interesting. I saw Elliot's hand resting possessively on her thigh beneath the table, a subtle reminder of ownership. I noticed how the twins' pictures were prominently displayed on the sideboard, though the children themselves were nowhere to be seen, likely upstairs with their nanny, too messy and unpredictable to be included in this carefully staged performance. Most of all, I observed the lies, small ones, large ones, woven so seamlessly into conversation that they almost seemed true. Elliot describing their recent family vacation to Aspen, omitting that Richard had been in hospice at the time. Claire mentioning her hands-on approach to parenting, when I knew she employed a full-time nanny and part-time household manager. Both of them creating a fiction of familial closeness with me that bore no resemblance to reality. By the time dessert was served, an elaborate matcha-infused confection that looked more like architecture than food, I'd made up my mind. I excused myself quietly, thanking my dinner companions, and slipped away to find my coat. The housekeeper, Maria, intercepted me in the hallway. "Leaving so soon, Mrs. Harper?" she asked, concern evident in her kind eyes. "I'm afraid I'm not feeling well," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. The evening had left me nauseated, not from the food, but from the performance I'd witnessed. "I'll get your coat." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "The children were asking for you earlier. Maxwell wanted to show you his new train set." My heart ached. "Please tell them Grandma will visit soon, I promise." Maria nodded, understanding more than she let on. She'd been with the family long enough to see the dynamics, to recognize the gulf between Claire's public persona and private behavior. As she helped me into my coat, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. "Madison made this for you last week. She's been waiting to give it to you." I opened it in the car, a crayon drawing of 4 figures, 2 small ones labeled Me and Max, 1 taller one labeled Mommy, and 1 with gray scribbles for hair labeled Grandma. All were holding hands, standing before what appeared to be a house with a large, colorful garden. At the bottom, in careful, newly learned letters, "I love you, Grandma." Tears blurred my vision as I carefully tucked the drawing into my purse. My grandchildren remembered me, thought of me, even included me in their concept of family. Despite the infrequent visits, despite Claire's efforts to maintain distance, they still felt connected to me. There was hope in that small crayon drawing, hope that perhaps the next generation wouldn't inherit the status-obsessed values their parents embraced. The following morning, Claire called, her voice clipped with barely contained anger. "You left without saying goodbye. The Tanakas noticed. It was embarrassing." "I wasn't feeling well," I replied, which still wasn't a lie. The entire evening had left me feeling ill, physically, emotionally, spiritually drained. "You could have at least made an excuse to me or Elliot. Do you have any idea how it looked, my own mother sneaking out like that? About as bad as it looked when you lied about me moving in with you? Or made up hobbies for me to seem more traditional?" She sighed dramatically. "That was just conversation, Mom. Social lubricant. Everyone does it." "I don't," I said firmly. And the Claire I raised didn't either. What happened to the girl who couldn't tell a lie without her ears turning red? The one who once confessed to stealing a candy bar because the guilt was too much to bear? "I grew up," she snapped. "I learned how the real world works. Sometimes you have to present things in the best possible light to get ahead. Even if it means using your mother as a prop? Inventing a relationship that doesn't exist? You're overreacting. It was one dinner party." "It's not about the dinner party, Claire. It's about everything. The way you've distanced yourself since your father died. The way you only call when you need something. The way you've embraced values that are completely counter to how we raised you." A long silence followed. When she finally spoke, her voice was cooler, more controlled. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is my life now. Elliot, the twins, our social circle. This is the world I've chosen. If you can't support that, can't play your part without making judgments, then maybe it's better if we take a step back." "My part?" I echoed, hurt giving way to incredulity. "What exactly is my part in your perfect life, Claire? Silent benefactor? Occasional babysitter? Holiday ornament to be displayed when convenient and tucked away when not? That's not fair." "No, it's not," I agreed. "None of this is fair. It's not fair that your father died believing his only child was too busy to sit with him during his final days. It's not fair that I've spent months grieving alone while you've been too concerned with appearances to offer genuine support. And it's certainly not fair that you expect me to participate in your charade of family values when you've shown so little respect for actual family." Another silence, this one heavier, charged with years of unspoken resentments. "I need to go," Claire finally said. "The twins have swim class." "Of course they do," I replied, not bothering to hide the bitterness. "Give them a kiss from Grandma, if you can fit that into your schedule." She hung up without responding. I sat in my half-packed living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and bubble wrap, feeling hollowed out. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Richard and I had imagined our golden years filled with grandchildren's laughter, family Sunday dinners, holiday traditions passed down. We'd planned to be involved, supportive parents and grandparents, not inconvenient afterthoughts in our daughter's curated life. That afternoon, I called my attorney Barbara, a sensible woman who'd handled Richard's will and had become something of a friend in the process. "I need to make some changes," I told her. "To my will, my financial arrangements, everything." "Significant changes?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I confirmed. "Very significant. How soon can we meet?" 2 days later, I sat in her office, signing documents that would reshape my family's future. The house proceeds, Richard's life insurance, our modest investments, all would now go into a trust for Maxwell and Madison, accessible only when they turned 25, with specific provisions for education and health care, but strict protections against early access by their parents. A small monthly stipend would be provided to Claire, enough to help but not enough to fund the extravagant lifestyle she and Elliot pursued. Are you sure about this? Barbara asked as I signed the final document. It's a major departure from your previous arrangements. I thought of Claire at the dinner party, using her father's memory to impress strangers. I thought of the years of growing distance, of phone calls ignored, of the way she'd rushed through Richard's funeral, eager to return to her real life. I thought of the little girl who once treasured family above all, who'd made father's day cards with such care, who'd insisted on helping me bake cookies for the neighbors every Christmas. I'm sure, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my heart. My grandchildren should know that true wealth isn't measured in luxury cars or exclusive addresses. It's measured in how you treat the people who love you unconditionally. They deserve that legacy, even if their mother has forgotten it. As I left Barbara's office, I felt lighter somehow, unburdened by expectations I could never meet, by a relationship that had become more performance than connection. The road ahead would be difficult. Claire would be furious when she eventually learned of my decision, but for the first time since Richard's death, I felt I was honoring him, honoring the values we'd shared, honoring the family we'd tried to create. What I couldn't have known then was how soon those values would be tested, how quickly the facade Claire and Elliot had constructed would begin to crack, and how a single Range Rover would become the catalyst for everything that followed. Life settled into a new routine after I moved into the condo. The space was smaller, but bright and manageable, with a balcony overlooking a small community garden. Martha lived just 3 doors down, close enough for impromptu coffee mornings, but not so close we felt on top of each other. I joined a book club at the local library, volunteered twice a week at the community kitchen, and slowly, carefully, began building a life without Richard, without Claire's constant disappointments. It wasn't the retirement we had planned, but it had its own quiet dignity, its own small pleasures. The grief remained, of course, a constant companion rather than an overwhelming tidal wave, but I was learning to live alongside it, to carry it without being crushed by its weight. 6 weeks after the disastrous dinner party, Claire called. I stared at her name on the screen, considering letting it go to voicemail. Our last conversation had ended poorly, with words that couldn't easily be taken back. But some maternal instinct, that inexplicable tether that binds a mother to her child despite all logic, made me answer. Mom. Her voice wasn't angry as I'd expected, but strangely subdued, almost hesitant. I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? This was new. Claire rarely suggested meetings unless she wanted something specific: childcare coverage, a family appearance at one of Elliot's work functions, the occasional obligatory holiday gathering. More unusual still was her tone, lacking its usual brisk efficiency, the underlying implication that my time was less valuable than hers. I suppose so, I replied cautiously. Is everything all right? A pause. Not really, but I'd rather discuss it in person. The cafe near your place, maybe? Around noon? I agreed, curiosity overriding lingering hurt. That night, I barely slept, my mind spinning through possibilities. Was Claire ill? Were the twins? Had something happened with Elliot? By morning, I'd constructed a dozen different scenarios, each more concerning than the last. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the lunch crowd, young professionals from nearby offices, retirees like myself enjoying the luxury of midday socializing, mothers with strollers stealing a moment of adult conversation over coffee. I spotted Claire immediately, seated at a corner table, her back to the wall. She was dressed more casually than usual, jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail rather than professionally styled. She looked younger this way, more like the daughter I remembered. You came, she said as I approached, relief evident in her voice. I wasn't sure you would after, you know. Of course I came, I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. You're my daughter. That simple statement, "You're my daughter," seemed to crack something in her composure. Her eyes welled with tears, an emotional display so unlike the carefully controlled Claire of recent years that I immediately reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" She took a shaky breath. "Everything, Mom. Everything's falling apart." The story emerged slowly, between sips of lukewarm tea and half-eaten sandwich bites. The Tanaka investment had fallen through, not because of my early departure from the dinner party, as I'd feared, but because of what came after. Mr. Tanaka, impressed by my candor, had made casual inquiries about Elliot's firm, about the lake house project, about the family values so prominently displayed. What he discovered didn't match the narrative Elliot had crafted. The financial projections were exaggerated, Claire admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot told me it was just standard business practice, presenting the best-case scenario to attract investors. But Mr. Tanaka's people dug deeper, found inconsistencies. It wasn't just the lake house. The entire foundation of their glamorous life was crumbling. Elliot had been leveraging their assets for years, taking out loans to maintain appearances, counting on his next bonus, his next promotion, his next big client to set things right. But the bonuses had grown smaller as the economy tightened. The promotion had gone to a colleague with better connections, and the big clients were increasingly hesitant, sensing something off in Elliot's desperate eagerness. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. Claire's laugh was hollow, empty of humor. "Bad enough that we've let the housekeeper go. Bad enough that Elliot's parents are suddenly too busy to take our calls. Bad enough that I've started looking at public school options for the twins." Public school. From Claire, who had once declared that her children would never set foot in the under-resourced disaster zones of the public education system, this admission was seismic. "We're not bankrupt," she continued, absently shredding her napkin into tiny pieces. "Not yet. But we're going to have to downsize dramatically. Sell the house, maybe move to a different neighborhood. Elliot might have to consider positions at smaller firms, ones that don't require the same appearance standards." I listened, resisting the urge to say I told you so. What good would that do now? Instead, I asked the question that had been hovering since she called. "Why are you telling me this, Claire? What do you need from me?" She looked up, surprised. "Need? I'm not asking for money if that's what you think." "Then what?" Her eyes, so like Richard's, met mine directly for perhaps the first time in years. "Advice, I guess. Support. You and Dad never cared about all the things Elliot and I got caught up in. The right address, the right schools, the right social circle. You were happy with enough, not always chasing more. I need to know how to do that. How to be." She hesitated, searching for the word. Authentic again. Authentic. Such a simple request, yet so profound. My daughter, who had spent years crafting a carefully curated image, was asking how to be real. "It starts with honesty," I said gently. "With yourself, with Elliot, with the twins. No more pretending to be something you're not. No more measuring your worth by what you own or who you know." She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. Elliot's struggling with that part. He grew up with certain expectations. His father's approval was always tied to achievement, to status. The idea of stepping back, of living more modestly. It feels like failure to him. "It's not failure to live within your means," I pointed out. "It's just common sense. Your father and I never had much, but we never spent what we didn't have either." "I know that now," she said quietly. "I didn't appreciate it then, but I do now." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we hadn't touched in years. Claire spoke about her fears, not just financial ones, but deeper. Anxieties about her marriage, her parenting, her sense of self. Elliot had grown distant as their financial situation deteriorated, spending more time at the office or the golf club, avoiding the reality waiting at home. The twins were picking up on the tension, becoming clingy, argumentative. I feel like I've failed them, Claire confessed. I've been so focused on giving them everything that I forgot to teach them what actually matters. It's not too late, I assured her. Children are resilient. They don't need designer clothes or exclusive schools. They need security, consistency, love. You can still give them that. As our lunch ended, Claire hesitated, then asked the question I could see had been weighing on her. Can I bring the twins over this weekend? They miss you. And I think I miss you too, Mom. The simple admission brought tears to my eyes. I'd love that, I said, squeezing her hand. More than anything. That Saturday morning, I woke early, filled with nervous energy. I baked blueberry muffins, Maxwell's favorite, and set out art supplies for Madison, who at 4 was showing signs of Richard's artistic talent. I arranged and rearranged the living room furniture, wanting everything to be perfect for this tentative reestablishment of family connections. They arrived precisely at 10, Claire parking her glossy black Range Rover in the visitor's spot outside my building. The twins tumbled out, racing toward me with squeals of, "Grandma, Grandma," that healed something broken inside me. I knelt down, gathering them into my arms, inhaling the sweet scent of childhood, shampoo and syrup, and that indefinable essence that only grandparents seem to notice. You've both grown so much, I marveled, and it was true. In the months since I'd seen them last, Maxwell had shot up an inch or more, his baby roundness giving way to a little boy's lankiness. Madison's formerly wispy hair now hung in proper curls, her face thinning out to reveal the distinctive cheekbones that had graced Richard's side of the family for generations. I lost a tooth, Maxwell announced proudly, displaying the gap in his smile. And I can write my whole name, Madison added, unwilling to be outdone. Want to see? I want to see everything, I assured them both, leading them inside where the muffins and art supplies waited. Claire followed more slowly, carrying a tote bag filled with the paraphernalia of modern parenthood: snacks, water bottles, changes of clothes, hand sanitizer. Thanks for having us, she said, her tone carrying a formality that suggested she still wasn't entirely comfortable with our new dynamic. You don't need to thank me, I replied. This is what family does. The morning passed in a blur of activity: board games with Maxwell, drawing with Madison, a walk to the nearby park where the twins explored the playground while Claire and I sat on a bench, continuing the halting conversation we'd begun at lunch. She shared more details about their financial situation, which was indeed precarious. Elliot's firm was implementing layoffs, and while his position seemed secure for now, his compensation would be significantly reduced. We've put the house on the market, Claire admitted, watching the twins navigate the jungle gym. It's too much. The mortgage, the maintenance, the property taxes. We're looking at townhouses further out, in good school districts but without the prestige address. How's Elliot handling it? I asked carefully. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Not well. He sees it as a personal failure. His parents aren't helping. They keep making these little comments about living within one's means and proper financial planning, as if they didn't pressure him into this lifestyle in the first place. And you? How are you handling it? Claire was quiet for a moment, considering. Better than I expected, actually. There's something freeing about letting go of all those expectations. I haven't had my hair professionally colored in 2 months, she added with a small laugh, tucking a strand behind her ear to reveal subtle gray at the roots. The world didn't end. I smiled, recognizing Richard's practicality emerging in our daughter. Your father would be proud of you, you know. He never cared about status or appearances. He cared about integrity, about doing the right thing even when it's difficult. I know, she said softly. I've been thinking about him a lot lately, wondering what advice he'd give, remembering How he always seemed so content with what we had, never chasing after more. He had what mattered to him, I explained. A job he found meaningful, a daughter he adored, a home filled with love. The rest was just stuff. The conversation paused as Maxwell ran over, proudly displaying a rock he'd found, ordinary to adult eyes but a treasure to a 6-year-old boy. Claire examined it seriously, asking questions about its shape and color, showing genuine interest in his discovery. This small interaction, so simple and authentic, gave me more hope for their future than any words could have. After the park, we returned to my condo for lunch. Simple sandwiches and fruit, nothing elaborate but received with enthusiasm by the twins, who seemed delighted by the novelty of eating at a table rather than the elaborate breakfast bar in their parents' kitchen. Claire helped with the preparation, moving around my small kitchen with growing ease, finding plates and napkins without having to ask. It felt natural, the way family should be. As the twins settled on the living room floor with books after lunch, Claire lowered her voice. "There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Something I'm not proud of." I waited, sensing the importance of whatever confession was coming. "The Range Rover," she began, glancing toward the window where her vehicle was visible in the parking lot. I wasn't entirely honest about it. This didn't surprise me. The luxury SUV had always seemed incongruous with their stated financial situation, even before Claire had revealed their mounting debts. "Elliot and I couldn't really afford it," she continued. "Not with everything else. The house, the twins, preschool, the club memberships. But everyone in his circle drives something similar. It's expected. So we financed it, stretched out the payments, put nothing down." I nodded, wondering where this was leading. "We're 3 months behind on the payments," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bank is threatening repossession. If that happens, Elliot's colleagues will notice. His parents will notice. Everyone will know we're not managing." Ah, there it was. The real reason for the renewed relationship, the family visit, the heart-to-heart conversations. Not simple reconciliation, but necessity. Claire needed something from me. Not just emotional support, but financial assistance. "How much are the monthly payments?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. $200, she replied, unable to meet my eyes. "Plus we need to catch up on the $3,600 we're already behind. Nearly $5,000 just to maintain appearances, to keep the neighbors, the colleagues, the in-laws from knowing that the carefully constructed facade was crumbling." I thought of Richard, of what he would say in this situation. He had never been one for flashy purchases or status symbols. His car had been 10 years old when he died, meticulously maintained but far from luxurious. "What would happen if you let it go?" I asked. "If you turned it in, told the bank you can't make the payments, and bought something more within your means?" Claire looked horrified. "We can't do that. The credit hit would be devastating. And Elliot's position at the firm. Appearances matter in finance. If word got out that we're struggling." "So you're asking me to help with the payments?" Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Just until Elliot's situation stabilizes. His year-end bonus should help, even if it's reduced. And once the house sells, we'll have some breathing room. We'll pay you back, I promise." I studied my daughter, seeing both the genuine distress in her eyes and the lingering entitlement in her assumption that I would bail them out. The old Claire, the one who had married Elliot, embraced his value system, distanced herself from her roots, would have expected me to write a check without question. This new, humbled version at least had the grace to look ashamed at asking. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "This isn't a small amount of money, Claire, and I'm not convinced it's the right solution to your problem." Disappointment flickered across her face, quickly masked. "Of course, I understand. Take all the time you need." The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly enough, though I could sense Claire's anxiety beneath her smiles. When it was time for them to leave, The twins hugged me tightly, extracting promises that they could visit again soon. I stood in the doorway, watching as they climbed into the gleaming SUV that had become such a burden, such a symbol of misplaced priorities. That evening, I called Martha, needing her sensible perspective. "Claire asked me for money today," I explained after recounting the visit. "Nearly $5,000 to catch up on car payments for a vehicle they can't afford." Martha's snort of disbelief was audible through the phone. "The nerve! After months of barely acknowledging your existence, she shows up with her hand out?" "It's not quite that simple," I admitted. "She seems genuinely remorseful. Their financial situation is deteriorating rapidly, and the twins, they shouldn't suffer for their parents' poor decisions." "The twins won't suffer if Claire and Elliot drive a Honda instead of a Range Rover," Martha pointed out pragmatically. "This isn't about need, Evelyn. It's about pride, about keeping up appearances." She was right, of course. The car wasn't a necessity, it was a status symbol. One that Claire and Elliot were desperate to maintain even as the rest of their carefully constructed life began to crumble. "What would Richard do?" Martha asked gently, knowing my late husband's opinion still guided many of my decisions. I smiled sadly, the answer immediate and clear. He'd help them, but not in the way they're asking. He'd offer to co-sign for a more practical vehicle. He'd suggest financial counseling. He'd make it clear that his support was conditional on real changes, not just temporary fixes. "Exactly," Martha agreed. "That's what you should do too." The next morning I made a phone call, not to Claire but to my attorney, Barbara. "I need information about a vehicle title," I explained. "My daughter's Range Rover. I'm considering helping with the payments, but I want to know exactly what I'm getting into." Barbara made some inquiries and called back that afternoon. "The vehicle is registered to Claire and Elliot jointly," she reported. "Purchased new 18 months ago, financed through Elliot's bank. As you suspected, they're several months behind on payments. The bank is preparing repossession paperwork." "What would it take to bring the account current?" I asked, already knowing the answer but wanting confirmation. "Just over $4,800 at this point, the 3 missed payments plus late fees and penalties. But Evelyn, if they're struggling to make the regular payments, catching up won't solve the underlying problem." "I know," I assured her. "I'm not planning to simply write a check. I have something else in mind. Can you draft an agreement for me? Something legally binding but not unnecessarily complicated." I outlined the terms I had in mind. Barbara listened, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is very generous," she said finally, "but also very specific. Are you sure this is how you want to approach it?" "I'm sure," I replied, feeling more confident than I had in months. "Claire needs to understand that there are consequences to choices, that family support comes with responsibility, not entitlement." Barbara promised to have the documents ready within 2 days. In the meantime, I called Claire, asking her to meet me, alone, at my condo that weekend. "I've made a decision about the car situation," I told her. "I'd like to discuss it in person." "Of course," she agreed immediately, hope evident in her voice. "Saturday morning again? The twins have soccer practice with Elliot." "Saturday is perfect. And Claire, I think it's best if Elliot doesn't know about our conversation yet. This needs to be between us first." She hesitated, then agreed, clearly puzzled but unwilling to question anything that might jeopardize the financial assistance she so desperately needed. Saturday dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect autumn days that hint at winter's approach without surrendering summer's warmth entirely. I spent the morning preparing, reviewing the documents Barbara had delivered, making fresh coffee, arranging everything in neat stacks on the dining table. I wanted the conversation to be businesslike, clear, without the emotional complications that might cloud Claire's understanding of what I was offering. She arrived precisely at 10, dressed casually again, but with subtle traces of the polished Claire I'd grown accustomed to. Her nails freshly manicured, her makeup skillfully applied to look natural rather than obvious. She hugged me briefly, her eyes immediately darting to the papers on the table. "Is that about the car?" she asked, unable to contain her curiosity. "It is," I confirmed, gesturing for her to sit. "Coffee? Or would you prefer tea?" She accepted coffee, more out of politeness than desire, her attention focused on the documents she couldn't quite read from her position. I took my time, pouring the coffee, adding the precise amount of cream she preferred, arranging cookies on a plate neither of us would touch. Finally, I sat across from her, hands folded on the table. "I've decided to help with the Range Rover situation," I began, watching. Relief flooded her features. "But not in the way you asked." Her expression shifted to confusion. "What do you mean?" "I'm not giving you money to catch up on payments for a vehicle you can't afford," I explained, keeping my tone gentle but firm. "That would solve the immediate problem, but not the underlying issue." Disappointment replaced confusion. "So you're not helping after all." I didn't say that. I pushed one of the documents toward her. "I'm offering to pay off the Range Rover entirely, not just the back payments, the entire remaining balance, approximately $82,000 according to Barbara's research." Claire's eyes widened in shock. "Mom, that's incredibly generous. I don't know what to say." "You should read the entire agreement before you say anything," I advised, tapping the document. "There are conditions." She pulled the paper closer, scanning the first page, then the second, her expression changing as she absorbed the terms. When she looked up, her bewilderment was evident. "You want to pay off the car, but the title would be transferred solely to you?" "I don't understand." "It's simple," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'll pay off the vehicle, taking over ownership. In return, I'll allow you and Elliot to continue using it, provided you meet certain conditions." "What conditions?" she asked cautiously. "Financial counseling, for one. You and Elliot need professional help managing your finances, creating a realistic budget, planning for the twins' future education. I've included the name of an excellent advisor who specializes in helping families in your situation." Claire flinched slightly at "your situation," but nodded. "That makes sense. What else?" "Regular family dinners, twice monthly at minimum. Not just you and the twins, but Elliot as well. Real connections, not staged appearances." A small smile tugged at her lips. "So you're basically charging us family time for car privileges?" "Essentially, yes," I admitted. "Is that unreasonable?" She shook her head slowly. "No, actually, it's kind of brilliant." "But what about the final condition?" She tapped the last paragraph. "The one about Christmas?" "Ah, that." I took a sip of my coffee, gathering my thoughts. "For the past 3 years, I've spent Christmas alone. Last year, you and Elliot went to Aspen with the twins. The year before, it was his parents' place in Scottsdale. The year before that, Richard's last Christmas, you managed a brief visit on Christmas Eve before heading to some colleague's party." Claire had the grace to look ashamed. "Mom, I held up a hand, stopping her. "I'm not asking for guilt or apologies. I'm asking for change. The condition is simple. Christmas is spent together, as a family, all of us. Here, at your place, at a rented cabin in the mountains, I don't care where, but together. That's non-negotiable." She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the full implications of my offer. It wasn't just about the car, and we both knew it. It was about resetting our relationship, about establishing boundaries and expectations that honored family connections without enabling destructive behaviors. "What if Elliot refuses?" she finally asked. "These terms, especially the financial counseling, He's very private about money matters. Very proud. Then I can't help you, I said simply. This isn't a partial offer, Claire. It's all or nothing. And Elliot needs to understand that the alternative is losing the car entirely, not to me, but to the bank. She nodded slowly, eyes returning to the document. When do you need an answer? Take the weekend to discuss it with Elliot. I'll need to know by Monday if I'm going to stop the repossession process. Claire gathered the papers carefully, sliding them into her purse. Thank you for the offer, she said formally, as if we were business associates rather than mother and daughter. It's more generous than we deserve. It's not about deserving, I corrected gently. It's about what we value. I value our family, messy, complicated, sometimes disappointing as it might be. I'm hoping you still do too. She stood to leave, hesitating by the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. For pulling away after Dad died. For getting caught up in Elliot's world. For forgetting what you taught me about what really matters. I know, I said, hugging her briefly. That's why I'm offering this second chance. After she left, I sat in my quiet condo, wondering if I'd made the right decision. The money didn't concern me. What else was I saving for, if not family? But the conditions, the formality of it all. Richard might have handled it differently. He'd always been more forgiving, more willing to overlook slights in the name of family harmony. Yet as I cleared away the untouched cookies, straightened, the couch pillows Claire had absently rearranged, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was the path forward, not enabling, not punishing, but offering a structured opportunity for growth, for reconnection, for rediscovering the values that had somehow gotten lost in Claire's pursuit of status and security. Monday morning, my phone rang precisely at 9, Claire's number. I answered with a calm I didn't entirely feel. Good morning. We accept, she said without preamble. All the conditions, exactly as written. Elliot wasn't happy initially, but when I explained the alternative, she paused. Actually, that's not entirely true. When I really explained everything, not just the car situation, but how I've been feeling, how disconnected we've become from what matters, he listened. Really listened, maybe for the first time in years. Relief washed over me. I'm glad to hear that, Claire. He suggested we start the family dinners this weekend, she continued, her voice lighter than I'd heard it in months. Nothing fancy? Just takeout pizza and board games with the twins. Would that work for you? That sounds perfect, I assured her. Absolutely perfect. We discussed logistics briefly, how the title transfer would work, when we'd meet with the financial advisor, practical details that needed addressing. But as the conversation wound down, Claire added something unexpected. One more thing, Mom. About Christmas. Yes? I asked cautiously, hoping she wasn't already trying to renegotiate. We want to host at our place this year. Assuming we've sold the house by then, it will be our last Christmas there. A proper farewell to that chapter of our lives. Would that be all right with you? I felt tears prick behind my eyelids, unexpected emotion welling up at this simple invitation. Yes, I managed. That would be lovely. Good, she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Oh, and Elliot wants you to know one thing. What's that? The Range Rover? He's actually relieved to be giving it up. Says it was always more trouble than it was worth. The constant worrying about scratches in parking lots, the premium gas, the pretending we could afford it. He's looking forward to driving something practical again. I laughed, surprised and delighted by this confession. Well, he's welcome to keep using it until you find something more suitable. That's part of the agreement. Actually, Claire said, a smile in her voice, we've already found something. An older model Subaru wagon. Great safety ratings, plenty. Of room for the twins and their gear. Excellent in snow. Elliot's college roommate is selling it. It's not fancy, but it's reliable. Sounds perfect, I said, hearing echoes of Richard in her practical assessment. It is, she agreed. And, Mom, thank you. Not just for the financial help, but for everything else. For not giving up on us even when we made it so difficult. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the autumn leaves drift from the maple tree in the community garden. Change was coming, not just for Claire and Elliot, but for all of us. A stripping away of pretense, of appearances, of the superficial trappings that had somehow become more important than the connections they were meant to enhance. The Range Rover would soon be mine, a peculiar trophy in this battle for family values. But the real victory wasn't in the paperwork or the legal agreements. It was in the shift I'd heard in Claire's voice, the return of something authentic beneath the polished exterior. It was in the promise of pizza and board games, of Christmas together, of rebuilding what had been broken but never beyond repair. Richard would have approved, I decided. Not perhaps of my methods. He'd always favored gentle guidance over dramatic gestures, but of the outcome. Our daughter finding her way back to the values we'd tried to instill. Our grandchildren, growing up knowing that family isn't measured in square footage or vehicle makes, but in showing up, in being present, in choosing each other even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. And if it took a luxury SUV to make that lesson stick, well, stranger things had happened in families. The important thing wasn't how we got here, but where we were going next, together, flawed but trying, on a road that led home. The paperwork for the Range Rover transfer went through without a hitch. Barbara handled everything efficiently, as always, ensuring that the bank received full payment and the title was properly transferred to my name. When she handed me the keys and documents, her expression was a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal concern. "Are you sure about this arrangement, Evelyn?" she asked, not for the first time. "It's a significant financial commitment for what amounts to uncertain returns." I tucked the papers into my handbag, the weight of the glossy black key fob unfamiliar, in my palm. "Some investments can't be measured in dollars and cents," I replied. "This is about something more important than money." Barbara nodded, her skepticism softening. "Well, for what it's worth, I hope it works out exactly as you've planned. Claire's fortunate to have a mother who believes in second chances." Second chances. The phrase lingered in my mind as I drove home in my sensible Honda, the Range Rover keys nestled in my purse like some strange talisman. Was that what I was offering Claire and Elliot, a second chance? Or was it something more complex? A recalibration, a course correction on a journey that had veered so far from its intended path that landmarks were no longer recognizable. The first family dinner under our new arrangement was scheduled for the following Saturday. Claire had insisted on hosting, despite my offers to handle everything at my condo. "We need to start as we mean to go on," she'd explained during our brief phone conversation. "And that means welcoming you into our home. Our real home, not the showpiece we've been pretending to live in." I arrived precisely at 5, a bottle of sparkling cider in hand. Richard and I had never been wine drinkers, and I saw no reason to start now for appearance's sake. The house looked different somehow, though nothing had visibly changed. Perhaps it was the absence of that artificial perfection, the magazine-worthy staging that had always made me feel like a visitor in a model home, rather than a mother in her daughter's house. Claire answered the door herself, no housekeeper now. Dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Behind her, I could hear the twins' voices raised in playful argument, the clatter of toy trains on hardwood floors. "Mom," she greeted me with a genuine smile, leaning in for a proper hug rather than the air kiss that had become her standard greeting in recent years. "Come in. We ordered from that Italian place you like, the one with the A. Garlic knots Dad always said would keep vampires away for a week." The casual mention of Richard, the easy reference to a family joke we'd shared, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Claire noticed, her expression softening. "I've been thinking about him a lot lately," she admitted as she took my coat. "Remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. The way he'd make up those ridiculous bedtime stories with talking vegetables. How he'd always save the Sunday crossword for us to do together." "He'd be happy to hear that," I said, following her into the kitchen. "He always worried you might forget the small moments once you were grown." The kitchen was chaotic in the best possible way, pizza boxes stacked on the counter, paper plates and napkins arranged haphazardly, the twins' artwork covering the refrigerator where designer magnets had once held only carefully curated photographs. Elliot stood at the sink, filling plastic cups with ice water, his suit replaced by khakis and a faded university sweatshirt. He looked younger, less polished, more like the earnest young man Claire had first brought home all those years ago. "Evelyn," he greeted me, setting down the water pitcher to offer a handshake that turned awkwardly into a half-hug. "Thank you for coming, and for everything else." The last part was delivered with a meaningful glance, an acknowledgement of the car situation we'd resolved without directly mentioning it. I nodded, accepting both his thanks and his discretion. "Grandma!" Maxwell spotted me from the doorway, launching himself across the kitchen to wrap his arms around my legs. "Did you bring your famous cookies? The ones with the chocolate chunks?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not this time, sweetheart, but I promise to bake a batch next week, just for you." Madison appeared more sedately, clutching a drawing in one hand. "I made this for you," she announced, presenting the paper with ceremonial gravity. "It's our family." The crayon artwork showed 5 figures standing before a simple house. Claire, Elliot, the twins, and me, all holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. No Range Rover, no designer clothes, no trappings of wealth or status. Just family. Connected. Together. "It's beautiful," I told her, genuinely touched. "May I keep it?" She nodded solemnly. "You can put it on your refrigerator. That's where important papers go." Dinner was served family-style at the kitchen table rather than in the formal dining room that had always felt more like a stage set than a place for actual meals. The twins chattered about school and friends, their words tumbling over each other in their eagerness to share every detail of their lives. Claire and Elliot exchanged glances over their heads, fond, exasperated, united in a way I hadn't seen in years. "We had our first meeting with the financial advisor yesterday," Claire mentioned as we were finishing our pizza. The twins had migrated to the living room, engrossed in a board game that seemed to involve plastic dinosaurs and considerable negotiation over rules. "How did it go?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral, curious rather than judgmental. Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that reminded me of the more relaxed young man he'd once been. It was illuminating and humbling. We've been living so far beyond our means for so long that I'd stopped noticing the discrepancy, stopped questioning whether we needed all the things we were killing ourselves to afford. The worst part was putting it all on paper, Claire added. Seeing the numbers in black and white, what we earn versus what we spend. It's embarrassing, frankly. 2 educated adults who couldn't manage basic budgeting. "Everyone makes financial mistakes," I offered. "The important thing is recognizing and correcting them before they become insurmountable." Elliot nodded, his expression serious. "We've set up a realistic budget, cut all the unnecessary subscriptions and memberships, canceled the weekend trip to Vermont we'd planned for next month. The advisor thinks if we're disciplined, we can be on solid ground within a year." "And the house?" I asked, knowing this was the largest financial burden they faced. "We've had 3 showings already," Claire replied. "One couple seemed very interested. If we accept their offer, we'd close by Thanksgiving." She managed a small smile. "Plenty of time to find a new place before Christmas. Have you started looking?" I kept my tone conversational, though the thought of them moving, potentially further away, caused a flicker of concern. Claire and Elliot exchanged a glance that suggested they'd been discussing this topic extensively. Actually, Claire began, we're considering something closer to you. There's a development of townhouses near the community college. Reasonable. HOA fees, good schools nearby, about 15 minutes from your condo. The idea that they were factoring my location into their housing decision touched me deeply. For so long, Claire had been pulling away, distancing herself physically and emotionally. This deliberate movement toward closer proximity felt like a significant shift, a tangible sign that her priorities were genuinely changing. That sounds lovely, I said, careful not to overreact, to treat this casually as if regular family proximity was the most natural thing in the world. The area has nice walking trails, too. The twins would enjoy those. The conversation flowed. Easily from there, practical discussions about schools and commute times, fond reminiscences about the neighborhood where Claire had grown up, gentle teasing about Elliot's complete inability to handle home repairs despite his repeated attempts. It felt natural, comfortable, like family dinners used to feel when Richard was alive and Claire was still finding her way in the world. As the evening drew to a close, Maxwell and Madison insisted I read their bedtime story. A privilege once, reserved for special occasions but now offered spontaneously, as if my presence in their nightly routine was both expected and welcomed. I sat between their beds in the room they shared, the dedicated playroom having been converted back to its original purpose, reading about a bear who couldn't sleep through winter and his woodland friends who helped him find peaceful slumber. "Will you come next weekend too?" Madison asked as I tucked the covers around her small shoulders. "Daddy says we're going to make spaghetti and meatballs like Grampy used to make." Spaghetti and meatballs had been Richard's specialty, his one culinary accomplishment. The fact that Elliot knew this, remembered this, and planned to honor it, caught me completely off guard. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I promised, dropping a kiss on her forehead. Downstairs, I found Claire and Elliot clearing away the dinner dishes, working in comfortable tandem. They looked up as I entered, their expressions oddly nervous, as if they'd been discussing something they weren't sure how to broach. "The twins are asleep?" Claire asked, placing the last plate in the dishwasher. "Nearly," I confirmed. Madison had a few important questions about bear hibernation habits first. Elliot smiled, leaning against the counter. "She's going through a science phase. Everything has to be factually accurate or she won't accept it. Just like her grandfather," I noted, seeing Richard's methodical mind reflected in our granddaughter's curiosity. He could never enjoy science fiction movies because he'd get too distracted by the inaccuracies. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind chimes from the back porch. A birthday gift from Richard to Claire years ago that I was surprised to see had survived their move toward more sophisticated decor. "Mom," Claire finally said, exchanging another glance with Elliot, "there's something we'd like to discuss with you, about the Range Rover." My heart sank slightly. Was this where they would try to renegotiate our agreement? Ask for more time? Before meeting the conditions? Explain why the financial counseling was too invasive, too demanding? "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "We've been thinking," Elliot began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "The arrangement we made, it's more than generous and we're grateful, but it doesn't feel right." "Doesn't feel right how?" I pressed, bracing myself for whatever would come next. Claire stepped forward, her expression earnest. "You shouldn't have had to buy back a car that was essentially a symbol of everything we got wrong. Our priorities, our values, our financial decisions. The Range Rover represents all of that. Taking your money to fix our mistake seems like perpetuating the problem, not solving it." I blinked, surprised by the direction this was taking. "What are you suggesting instead?" "We want to sell it," Elliot said firmly. Use the proceeds to pay off some of our other debts, make a fresh start. The Subaru is more than adequate for our needs. More than adequate, he repeated, as if still amazed by this revelation. It has heated seats and everything. But the Range Rover is mine now, I pointed out. Not to be difficult, but to understand their reasoning. Legally, I own it. We know, Claire acknowledged. That's why we're asking your permission. Your blessing, really. You could sell it yourself, keep the money. God knows you've earned it after everything we've put you through. Or we could sell it and split the proceeds. Whatever you think is fair. I studied them both. These two people who had seemed so foreign to me just weeks ago, who had created a life I neither recognized nor understood. Now I could see glimmers of the Claire I'd raised, the Elliot she'd first fallen in love with. Practical, thoughtful, beginning to recognize the difference between what they wanted and what they needed. Let me think about it, I said finally. It's a significant decision. We shouldn't rush it. They nodded, clearly relieved that I hadn't dismissed the idea outright. As I gathered my purse and sweater to leave, Claire walked me to the door, lingering in the entryway after Elliot had tactfully retreated to check on the twins. I mean it, Mom, she said quietly. About selling the car. It's not about the money, though God knows we could use it. It's about, I don't know, symbolism, I guess. Cutting ties with who we were trying to be and figuring out who we actually are. I squeezed her hand, touched by the sincerity in her voice. I understand, Claire. More than you know. The drive home in my Honda, practical, reliable, paid for years ago, gave me time to reflect on their unexpected proposal. The Range Rover sat in my assigned parking space at the condo, a glossy black monument to excess that looked absurdly out of place among the sensible sedans and minivans of my neighbors. I hadn't driven it yet, hadn't even sat behind the wheel since taking possession. It wasn't my style, wasn't my world. The following week passed in a flurry of activity. Claire called almost daily with updates. A second showing of the house that went well, the twins' Halloween costume plans, dinosaurs in keeping with Madison's scientific phase, Elliot's preliminary conversations with smaller firms that might offer positions with less pressure and more reasonable hours. Each call felt like another stitch in the fabric of our reconnection, another step toward the relationship we'd once taken for granted. I spent my days volunteering at the community kitchen, attending my book club, having coffee with Martha and other friends who had stood by me during the difficult months after Richard's death. But increasingly, my thoughts turned to Claire's proposal about the Range Rover, to the symbolism of holding on to or letting go of this vehicle that had become such a fraught representation of values and choices. By the time Saturday arrived, spaghetti and meatballs night, as the twins excitedly reminded me when I arrived, I had made my decision. I waited until after dinner, after the twins were bathed and in pajamas but still awake and lively in the living room, building an elaborate fort from couch cushions and blankets. I've been thinking about the Range Rover, I announced, my voice casual but loud enough to catch everyone's attention. Even the twins paused in their architectural efforts, sensing the importance of the moment. Claire straightened, exchanging a quick glance with Elliot. And? I agree it should be sold, I said, but not to pay off debts or split the proceeds. What then? Elliot asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. I smiled, looking at each of them in turn. Claire, Elliot, Maxwell with his father's serious eyes, Madison with her grandfather's questioning tilt of the head. I think the money should go into education funds for the twins. Not just college, but music lessons, art classes, science camps, whatever interests they develop, whatever passions they want to pursue. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Maxwell's enthusiastic, "Does that mean I can take karate?" A question that prompted laughter from all the adults. It means, Claire explained, kneeling to his level, that Grandma wants to make sure you and your sister have opportunities to learn and grow, to find out what you love doing. Like Grampy's camera? Madison asked, her small face serious. The one he let me use for taking pictures of butterflies? Exactly like that, I confirmed, my voice catching slightly at this evidence that she remembered Richard, remembered his passion for photography that he'd so lovingly tried to share. Grandpa always said finding what you love is the most important. Education. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Mom, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Elliot nodded, his expression more solemn. It's very generous. More than we deserve. It's not about deserving, I corrected gently. It's about values. About what matters. This way, something positive comes from a decision that wasn't the wisest. A legacy of opportunity instead of obligation. The twins had already lost interest in the adult conversation, returning to their fort construction with renewed vigor. But Claire crossed the room to embrace me. A real hug, tight and lingering like the ones she used to give before college, before Elliot, before status and appearances became her guiding principles. Thank you, she whispered against my shoulder, for not giving up on us. In that moment, with my daughter in my arms and my grandchildren playing nearby, I felt Richard's presence more strongly than I had since his death, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the living legacy of his values, his wisdom, his unwavering belief in second chances. He would have approved of this solution, this transformation of something superficial into something meaningful. He would have seen it as I did, not an ending, but a beginning, a chance to redirect the family story toward something truer, more authentic, more aligned with what really mattered. The week before Thanksgiving brought unexpected news, an offer on Claire and Elliot's house, slightly below asking price, but with a fast closing date and minimal contingencies. They accepted immediately, relieved to have this chapter concluding, eager to move forward with finding a more modest, more manageable home closer to mine. We'll be in temporary housing for Christmas, Claire explained during one of our now regular evening phone calls. The townhouses we like won't be ready until February. But Elliot's firm has corporate apartments they let employees use during transitions. It won't be fancy, but it will be clean and furnished. Plenty of room for our Christmas celebration. Are you sure you don't want to hold Christmas at my place? I offered again. The condo isn't large, but we'd manage. No, we want a host, she insisted. It's important to us, to me especially. I've spent too many years thinking of holidays as performances, as occasions to impress rather than connect. I want to show you, and myself, that I can create a meaningful Christmas in a basic apartment with minimal decorations and simple food. I couldn't argue with that sentiment, so rich with the values Richard and I had tried to instill. Whatever you decide, sweetheart, I'll be there with bells on. Speaking of decisions, she continued, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. We've found a dealer for the Range Rover. They're offering a fair price. Not what we paid originally, of course, but cars depreciate the moment they leave the lot, especially luxury vehicles. That sounds reasonable, I agreed. When would they want to complete the sale? This weekend, if possible. They have a client specifically, looking for this model and color. I know it's short notice, but this weekend is fine, I assured her. I'll bring the title, and we can handle everything together. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect late autumn day that showcases New England. At its finest, leaves crunching underfoot, the air sharp with wood smoke and impending winter, the sky a crystalline blue that seems to stretch into infinity. I dressed carefully, choosing comfort over style as had always been my preference. As I picked up the Range Rover's title from my desk, my eyes fell on the framed photo of Richard that had occupied that spot since his death. Richard at 50, laughing beside our old canoe on the lake where we'd spent so many summer weekends. His face tanned and relaxed, his eyes crinkling at the corners with genuine joy. Well, what do you think? I asked the photograph, holding up the title paperwork. Good decision? His smiling face offered no answer, of course, but I felt a sense of peace, of rightness, that I chose to interpret as approval. Richard had never been one for material possessions, had driven the same sensible car for a decade, had worn clothes until they wore out regardless of changing fashions. He would have been puzzled by the whole Range Rover saga, but he would have understood the underlying principles at stake: family connection, genuine values, learning from mistakes rather than compounding them. I met Claire and Elliot at the dealership, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and an army of sales staff in matching polo shirts. The manager who greeted us was professionally courteous, clearly seeing this as a straightforward business transaction rather than the emotionally freighted moment it represented to our family. "Mrs. Harper, if you'll just sign here," he indicated the appropriate lines on the paperwork. "And initial here, here, and here. This acknowledges the purchase price and transfers ownership to our dealership." I signed where indicated, officially, relinquishing ownership of a vehicle I'd never actually driven. As I handed the pen back to the manager, he produced a check with a flourish. "Made out to you, as requested. If you'd like to deposit it immediately, there's a bank branch just down the street that's open until noon on Saturdays." I accepted the check, glanced at the substantial figure, and then handed it directly to Claire. "For the twins' education fund, as we discussed, you and Elliot should set it up properly, a 529 plan or whatever the financial advisor recommends." Claire took the check with visible emotion, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mom, are you absolutely sure? This is a lot of money. You could use it for yourself. Travel, home improvements, whatever you want." "What I want," I said firmly, "is for Maxwell and Madison to have opportunities, to explore their interests without worrying about cost, to discover their passions the way their grandfather did." I smiled, remembering Richard's various enthusiasms. Over the years, photography, woodworking, astronomy, each pursued with wholehearted dedication regardless of skill level. That's worth more to me than any trip or home renovation. Elliot cleared his throat, blinking rapidly in a clear effort to maintain composure. "We'll make sure it's set up properly. Legally protected, earmarked specifically for educational purposes." "I know you will," I assured him, and meant it. Despite his financial missteps, I had never doubted Elliot's fundamental decency, his genuine love for his children. He had simply lost his way for a time, seduced by status and appearances like so many in his position. As we left the dealership, I glanced back at the Range Rover one last time, gleaming, imposing, a testament to wealth and status that had nearly cost my daughter her family connections, her authentic self, her grounding in what truly mattered. Soon it would belong to someone else, would represent something else entirely in another family's story. I felt no attachment to it, no regret at its passing from our lives. Outside in the parking lot, Claire hugged me impulsively. "I know I keep saying this, but thank you. Not just for the money, but for the wake-up call. For helping us see what we were becoming before it was too late." I returned the embrace, marveling at how natural physical affection between us had become again after years of stiff, formal interactions. "That's what family does," I said simply. "We help each other find our way back when we get lost." Elliot stood awkwardly to one side, clearly moved but unsure how to express it. Finally, he extended his hand formally, a gesture that struck me as both touchingly sincere and slightly comical in its stiffness. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything. The financial assistance, yes, but more than that, the second chance, the opportunity to reset, to rebuild on better foundations." I shook his hand, then impulsively pulled him into a brief hug as well. "Your family, Elliot, for better or worse, through luxury SUVs and sensible sedans." He laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm starting to think the Sedans have a lot to recommend them." They certainly have better gas mileage, I agreed with a smile. And they're much easier to park. We parted ways in the parking lot, Claire and Elliot heading to the bank to deposit the check before it closed, me returning to my condo, where Martha was coming over for lunch and an afternoon of planning our volunteer schedule for the holiday season. As I drove home in my practical Honda, I felt lighter somehow, unburdened by a weight I hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. The Range Rover saga was over, its material presence in our lives concluded, but its impact lingered, not as a symbol of status or wealth, but as the catalyst for a family recalibration, a return to foundations that had been temporarily lost but never completely forgotten. In its own strange way, that overpriced vehicle had become the means of rediscovering what mattered most. Richard would have appreciated the irony, I thought with a smile. He always did enjoy when life's lessons came packaged in unexpected ways. The week before Christmas brought a flurry of activity. Claire and Elliot had completed their move out of the sprawling showcase home and into the corporate apartment, a serviceable 3-bedroom unit in a development not far from the community college. "It's basic," Claire had warned during one of our daily phone calls, "but clean and functional." The twins are actually sharing a room again and loving it. They've created an elaborate pulley system between their beds to pass toys back and forth after lights out. I smiled at the image, so at odds with the carefully separated, meticulously decorated bedrooms they'd occupied in the previous house. "Children are remarkably adaptable," I observed. "Far more so than adults, sometimes." "Isn't that the truth?" Claire agreed with a self-deprecating laugh. "Maxwell hasn't mentioned his iPad once since we packed it away. Meanwhile, I'm still searching every drawer for my expensive face cream before remembering I switched to the drugstore brand. These small admissions of adjustment, of scaling back and simplifying, came with increasing frequency now, delivered not with resentment, but with a kind of bemused self-awareness that suggested genuine growth rather than mere accommodation. Claire was discovering, as Richard had always maintained, that luxury items rarely deliver happiness proportionate to their cost. As Christmas approached, I found myself filled with an anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. The holiday had become such a source of disappointment, of pointed exclusion, that I'd trained myself to treat it as just another day. Perhaps with slightly more festive food and a phone call to Martha, but otherwise unremarkable. This year would be different. This year I would be surrounded by family, by the sound of children's excitement, by the simple joy of shared celebration. The twins had called me personally, Claire letting them use her phone while she supervised in the background to issue the formal invitation. "Christmas is at our house, Grandma," Maxwell had announced importantly. "Daddy says we're doing it old school this year." "Old school," I repeated, amused by the phrase coming from a 6-year-old. "That means like when you and Grampy were little," Madison explained with the patient superiority of an older sibling, by 12 minutes, as she frequently reminded everyone. "With homemade decorations and real food instead of the fancy stuff nobody actually likes." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, mentally comparing the elaborate but largely untouched charcuterie boards and specialty cocktails of Claire's previous holiday gatherings with the simple, hearty meals Richard and I had always provided. Meals that left guests satisfied rather than impressed. "That sounds perfect," I assured them both. "What time should I arrive?" There was a muffled consultation with Claire before Maxwell returned to the phone. "Mom says any time after breakfast. We're doing presents in the morning, just us, but then you can come for the rest of Christmas." The emphasis on rest touched my heart. The implication that the day wasn't complete, wasn't fully Christmas, until I joined them. Such a simple acknowledgement, yet so meaningful after years of feeling peripheral, optional, an afterthought, to their holiday plans. 2 days before Christmas, I made the rounds of my favorite local shops, selecting thoughtful gifts for each family member. For Maxwell, a beginner's microscope kit I'd spotted in the educational toy store. For Madison, a set of proper colored pencils and a sketchbook, nurturing the artistic talent she'd inherited from Richard. For Claire, a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature Christmas tree, and a handwritten note. Explaining this would be the first of many charms, a new one each year to mark our holidays together. For Elliot, I'd found a vintage fishing tackle box at the antique store, remembering Claire's casual mention that he'd expressed interest in learning to fish, something his status-conscious father had dismissed as a hobby for people who can't afford golf. The corporate apartment complex was easy to find, its uniform buildings arranged around a central courtyard that had been perfunctorily decorated for the holidays. A few strands of lights, a somewhat bedraggled artificial tree in the lobby. I parked my Honda beside Elliot's new-to-him Subaru, gathering my bags of gifts and the sweet potato casserole I'd insisted on contributing to the meal. The familiar recipe passed down from my grandmother had been a staple at our holiday table throughout Claire's childhood. Its absence from recent family gatherings, replaced by caterer-provided dishes with French names and exotic ingredients, had always felt symbolic of the wider disconnect between the values I'd tried to instill and the life Claire had embraced. Unit 14B was on the second floor, its door distinguished from identical neighbors only by a handmade wreath, clearly, crafted by the twins, pine cones, ribbons, and glitter arranged with more enthusiasm than symmetry. I hadn't even knocked before the door flew open, revealing Maxwell and Madison in matching flannel pajamas, their faces alight with excitement. "Grandma's here," Maxwell announced to the apartment at large, as if heralding royalty. Grandma, you have to see our tree." Madison grabbed my hand, tugging me inside before I'd even set down my bags. "We made all the decorations ourselves. Well, except for Grampy's special ones." I froze momentarily at the mention of Richard's special ones, the small collection of meaningful ornaments he'd accumulated over the years. A tiny brass canoe commemorating our honeymoon in the Adirondacks. A hand-carved wooden piano marking Claire's first recital. A delicate glass snowflake from our 25th anniversary trip to Vermont. I'd assumed these treasures had been discarded years ago, casualties of Claire's shift toward more coordinated designer holiday decor. The apartment's living area was modest but cheerful, transformed by the family's efforts from generic corporate housing to something unmistakably festive. Paper snowflakes hung from light fixtures. Chains of red and green construction paper looped along the walls. And in the corner stood a small but perfect Fraser fir, its branches adorned with the most beautiful mismatched collection of decorations I'd seen in years. "Look, Grandma," Madison pointed proudly. "That's Grampy's canoe. Mommy let me hang it because I'm super careful." There it was, the small brass ornament Richard had found in a lakeside gift shop decades ago, still gleaming, still carrying. Memories of those early days when our love was new and our future stretching bright before us. And beside it, the piano, the snowflake, all the meaningful markers of our family history that I'd thought lost to time and changing tastes. "I saved them," Claire said quietly, appearing from the kitchen, a dish towel draped over her shoulder and a smudge of flour on her cheek. "All these years, I couldn't bring myself to use them in our other life. They didn't match the aesthetic." She rolled her eyes at her former self. "But I kept them in a special box. They were too important to let go." The simple admission that some connections had been preserved even as others frayed brought tears to my eyes. Claire noticed, stepping forward to embrace me with none of the self-consciousness that had characterized our interactions for so long. "Merry Christmas, Mom," she murmured. "Thank you for giving us a second chance." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I replied, returning the hug with equal warmth. "Thank you for remembering what matters." The day unfolded with a comfortable rhythm, so different from the orchestrated perfection of Claire and Elliot's previous holiday entertainments. We ate lunch at the kitchen table, no elaborate place settings, just simple pottery plates and everyday flatware. The food was homemade and plentiful. Roast chicken rather than the standing rib roast Elliot had always insisted was the only acceptable Christmas main course. mashed potatoes whipped to creamy perfection by Maxwell, with considerable supervision, green beans prepared with more butter than was strictly necessary because, as Claire confessed with a laugh, that's how Dad always made them, and they tasted so much better than my healthy version. After lunch, we exchanged gifts in the living room, sitting on the floor around the tree because the apartment came furnished with only a love seat and one armchair. The twins exclaimed over their presence with genuine delight. Maxwell immediately, wanting to examine dust mites from the carpet, Madison already sketching a snowman with her new colored pencils. Claire fastened the bracelet around her wrist with visible emotion, promising to treasure each charm as it joined the collection. Elliot examined the vintage tackle box with the reverence of someone receiving a family heirloom rather than a recent purchase. "This is perfect," he said, running his fingers over the worn leather handle. "My grandfather had one just like this. I used to watch him organize his lures for hours, categorizing them by type and color." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I never told anyone that before. It didn't seem relevant to the life we were living." "Well, it's relevant now," I assured him. "And if you'd like a fishing companion come spring, I happen to know my way around a rod and reel. Richard and I used to spend every other weekend at the lake when Claire was small." His surprise gave way to genuine pleasure. "I'd like that very much, Evelyn." As afternoon drifted into evening, we played board games at the kitchen table, Scrabble for the adults, a simplified version for the twins who formed a team with frequent coaching from Claire. When Madison's eyelids began to droop around 8:00, Elliot scooped her up with practiced ease. "Bedtime for dinosaurs," he announced, using the nickname that had evolved from their current prehistoric obsession. "Say goodnight to Grandma." "But it's Christmas," Maxwell protested weakly, his own yawn undermining his argument. "We're supposed to stay up late on Christmas." "You have stayed up late," Claire pointed out, ruffling his hair affectionately. "And Santa has already come and gone. Even dinosaurs need their rest." The bedtime routine was swift and efficient, teeth brushing supervised by Elliot, one story read by Claire, final hugs distributed all around. When the children's bedroom door closed behind them, a comfortable quiet settled over the apartment, broken only by the soft sounds of Claire making tea in the kitchen. "They're wonderful children," I observed as she returned with 3 steaming mugs. "So resilient, so open-hearted." "They get that from you and Dad," she replied, settling beside me on the love seat while Elliot took the armchair. "The openness, the enthusiasm for simple pleasures. I tried so hard to give them every advantage, every opportunity. I didn't realize, until recently, that the greatest advantages aren't material at all." "It's an easy mistake to make," I said gently, "especially when you're surrounded by people who measure success in square footage and vehicle brands." Elliot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My father still doesn't understand why we're scaling down, as he calls it. He sees it as failure, as giving up. He actually suggested I seek therapy for depression because no mentally healthy person would willingly leave Lakeview Heights for a townhouse near the community college." "And what did you tell him?" I asked, curious about this man I was coming. To know anew, this more authentic version of my son-in-law emerging from beneath layers of pretense and expectation. "I told him I've never felt more mentally healthy in my life," Elliot replied with unexpected firmness. "That for the first time, since college, I'm making choices based on what feels right for our family, not what looks impressive to others." Claire reached across to squeeze his hand, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes about their shared journey, their unified recommitment to values beyond appearance and status. "We're still figuring it out," she admitted to me. "Some days are harder than others. I still catch myself wondering what people will think when they see our new address, our simpler lifestyle. But then I remember how it felt when we were constantly stretching, constantly pretending, constantly worried about keeping up appearances. That was the real failure. not downsizing to a home we can actually afford. We talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing with an ease I hadn't experienced with Claire in years. She shared stories about the twins' adjustment to their new school, about her own tentative steps toward reconnecting with old friends she'd drifted away from during her social climbing phase. Elliot spoke about interviewing with smaller firms, about rediscovering his original passion for finance as a tool to help regular people achieve stability rather than as a path to wealth and status for himself. As the clock approached midnight, Claire stifled a yawn, then laughed at herself. Apparently, dinosaurs aren't the only ones who need their rest. Would you like to stay over, Mom? The sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not the most comfortable, but I should probably head home, I said, touched by the offer but aware of the apartment's limited space. Martha's coming for breakfast tomorrow, but thank you for asking. For everything, really. This has been the most wonderful Christmas. The first of many, Claire promised, walking me to the door. Next year we'll be in the townhouse. More room, a proper guest bedroom. You could stay the whole week if you wanted. The casual invitation, so different from the carefully scheduled limited engagements of recent years, warmed me from within. Let's start with Christmas Eve through Boxing Day and see how we all feel, I suggested with a smile. Even the closest families need a little breathing room. Claire laughed, acknowledging the wisdom in this measured approach. Deal. But you're always welcome, Mom. Always. I hope you know that now. As I drove home through quiet streets, Christmas lights twinkling from windows and doorways, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past few months. From estrangement to reconciliation, from superficial connection to genuine relationship, from a daughter who banned me from Christmas to one who insisted I was essential to the celebration. The transformation wasn't complete. Real change never happens overnight, and I harbored no illusions that there wouldn't be setbacks, disagreements, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But the foundation had been rebuilt, stronger, now for having been tested, more valued for having been nearly lost. The Range Rover that had catalyzed this family reckoning was gone now, sold to fund opportunities for the next generation rather than status symbols for the current one. In its place had emerged something far more valuable: authenticity, connection, shared purpose. The vehicle that had once symbolized everything wrong with Claire and Elliot's priorities had, in its passing, cleared the way for everything right to take root and flourish. Richard would have appreciated the irony, I thought, as I pulled into my condo's parking lot. He had always maintained that the most important journeys weren't measured in miles or destinations, but in growth, in understanding, in becoming more fully ourselves and more deeply connected to those we love. By that measure, our family had traveled further in these past months than any luxury SUV could have taken us. As I let myself into my quiet condo, I spotted Madison's drawing on the refrigerator. 5 stick figures holding hands, family connected. Despite differences, despite mistakes, despite the inevitable complications that come with loving imperfect people imperfectly, I touched the crayon outline of my own figure, gray-haired but standing tall, an equal part of the circle rather than an afterthought or obligation. Some might see our story as one of loss, of wealth, of status, of the glossy trappings of success as defined by certain segments of society. But I knew the truth. This Christmas hadn't marked an ending but a beginning, not a diminishment, but an expansion of what was truly valuable. My daughter hadn't lost her way. She had found it again. And in doing so, she had given us all the most precious gift of all. Not a luxury SUV with heated leather seats and a premium sound system, but a family reconnected, recommitted, ready to travel forward together on a road paved with authentic values and genuine love. That, I thought as I prepared for bed in my quiet condo, my heart full and at peace, was worth more than any vehicle, any address, any status symbol ever invented. That was the true luxury none of us could afford to live without. Up next, you've Got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.